You were never stupid. Not when the name slipped through your memory, right as you reached for it. Not when the sentence blurred, and you had to start again, and again, and again. Not when your mind drifted, quietly, subtly, right when it mattered most. Right when you needed to be sharp. Right when you needed to be there. That wasn't a lack of intelligence. That was absence. A moment where your body stayed. But your mind left without you even noticing. Because in a world engineered to fracture your attention, where every second competes for your focus, where silence is replaced with noise and stillness with endless stimulation, the real skill is no longer thinking. It's not about knowing more. It's not about processing faster. It's not about trying harder. It's about being present. Fully. Completely. Without fragments of your attention leaking into distractions you didn't choose. And the truth is, no one ever taught you how to do that. You were taught to memorize, to perform, to react, to keep up, but never to stay. Never to hold your awareness in one place long enough for clarity to emerge. Never to notice when your mind begins to drift and gently bring it back. Never to exist fully inside a single moment. So you adapted. You learned to function while distracted, to operate while divided, to live with only a fraction of your attention at a time. And over time, that fraction started to feel normal, but it was never the truth of your mind. Because beneath the noise, beneath the scattered thoughts, beneath the constant pull to look away, there is a version of you that has always been capable of focus. Sharp, calm, present, not broken, not slow, not lacking, just disconnected. And once you understand that, everything begins to change. There is a reason your focus feels broken, a reason your thoughts don't stay still, why they scatter, drift, dissolve before they can fully form, why your discipline slips, even when you want to stay consistent, why your mind refuses to remain where your body already is. You sit down to work, but something pulls you away, not physically, but mentally, a quiet urge to check, to switch, to escape. And before you even notice it, you're gone. Not completely, but enough to lose clarity, enough to lose depth, enough to feel like something inside you isn't working the way it should. But understand this clearly. It's not laziness. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's fragmentation. Your attention has been divided, trained, conditioned to move constantly, pulled in 1,000 directions. Small interruptions, repeated daily. Notifications that demand urgency. Noise that fills every empty space. Endless stimulation designed to keep you switching, shifting, seeking the next thing. And over time, your mind adapts. It learns to expect distraction, to crave it, to feel uncomfortable without it, until stillness becomes unfamiliar. Focus feels heavy, and presence becomes rare. Until one day, you sit down to think, to work, to create, to simply be, and something feels off. You try to concentrate, but your mind slips. You try to stay, but it drifts. You try to hold a single thought, but it fragments. And in that quiet moment, you realize something unsettling. You're not fully there anymore. Not in the way you used to be. Not in the way you could be. But this is where most people get it wrong. They try to force it back. They push harder. They rely on motivation. They chase discipline through pressure, intensity, bursts of effort. And it never lasts. Because what you lost cannot be rebuilt through force. It requires something else. A method. Quiet. Subtle. Almost invisible to the outside world. But powerful enough to reshape the way your mind operates. A discipline practiced for centuries, not in noise, but in stillness. Not through struggle, but through awareness. A method that doesn't depend on motivation, because motivation fades. A method that doesn't require force, because force creates resistance. A method that doesn't rely on willpower, because willpower breaks under pressure. Instead, it works with your mind, not against it. It teaches you how to return, how to remain, how to hold your awareness, without tension, without strain, to bring your mind back, and keep it there, not perfectly, but consistently, until presence becomes natural again, until focus stops feeling like effort, and starts becoming your default state. This method is called Zanshin. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Stupid. Most people misunderstand their own minds. They look at their inability to focus, at the way their thoughts slip, scatter, disappear mid-process, and they come to a quiet conclusion. Something must be wrong with me. They assume that if they can't hold attention, if they can't stay locked in, If they can't think as clearly as they want to, then they must not be smart enough, not disciplined enough, not capable enough. But that assumption is flawed, because intelligence doesn't just vanish. It doesn't switch off randomly. It doesn't abandon you in certain moments and return in others without reason. Intelligence is still there. What disappears is attention. And without attention, intelligence has nothing to operate through. Think about it. There are moments, rare but undeniable, where everything aligns. Moments where your mind feels different, sharper, faster, quieter. You understand things almost instantly. Patterns become obvious. Decisions feel effortless. Your reactions are precise, almost automatic. You're not second-guessing. You're not hesitating. You're not lost in noise. You're just clear. In those moments, you are fully present. No background chatter. No pull toward distraction. No fragmented thoughts competing for space. Just awareness. Pure, uninterrupted, attention directed exactly where it needs to be. And in that state, you don't feel stupid. You don't feel slow. You don't feel incapable. You feel like yourself at your highest level, which reveals something important. If your intelligence can appear so clearly in one moment and seem absent in another, then the problem is not intelligence. It's access. And access is controlled by attention. So the real question is not, are you intelligent? Because you've already experienced the answer. The real question is, where is your attention when it matters most? Where does it go when you need to think deeply? Where does it drift when you try to focus? What pulls it away before you even realize it's gone? Because without attention, even the sharpest mind becomes dull. Even the most capable person becomes inconsistent. Even the clearest thoughts never fully form. Not because they can't, but because they were never given the space to exist. Chapter 2. What Zanshin really is. Zanshin is not just focus. It's not the kind of focus you force, where your mind tightens, your forehead tenses, and you try to hold your attention in place through effort alone. It's not grinding your way through distraction. It's not battling your own thoughts. It's not locking yourself into a moment with pressure, because that kind of focus doesn't last. It burns out. It collapses. It creates resistance. Zanshin is something deeper, something quieter. It is a state of relaxed awareness, a calm, steady alertness, where your mind is fully present, fully engaged, but never tense. You are aware without strain, focused without force, attentive without effort. Your mind isn't gripping the moment. It's resting inside it. There is no urgency, no internal struggle, no sense of trying to hold on to your attention. Because in Zanshin, there is nothing to hold. You are simply there. In ancient practice, this state had a deeper meaning. It wasn't just about being present during an action. It was about maintaining awareness. Even after the action was complete, after the movement ends, after the task is done, after the moment passes, your awareness remains. Unbroken, continuous, no gaps, no sudden drop, no mental switching off. Because the moment you switch off, even for a second, you lose continuity. And where there is no continuity, there is no control. That principle, once applied in disciplined environments, is now missing in modern life. Because today, your attention is constantly turning on and off. You start something, and for a brief moment, you're there. Then your mind drifts. Not dramatically, but subtly. A thought appears. A memory pulls you away. An urge to check something interrupts the flow. And just like that, the connection breaks. You listen to someone speak, but halfway through, your mind leaves the conversation. You nod, you respond, but you weren't really there. You exist in a moment, but only partially. Your body remains, but your awareness is scattered across past thoughts, future concerns, and external distractions. And because this happens so often, it starts to feel normal, but it isn't. Zanshin is the opposite of that state. It is not intensity. It is continuity, a steady, unbroken presence. That does not flicker, does not collapse, does not disappear between moments. It carries through, from one action to the next, from one breath to the next, from one moment into the next, without interruption. No drifting, no unconscious switching, just awareness sustained. And when you begin to experience that, even briefly, you realize something powerful. Focus was never about trying harder. It was about never leaving in the first place. Chapter 3. Why your mind keeps leaving you. Your mind isn't broken. It hasn't failed you. It hasn't become weak. It hasn't lost its ability to focus. It's been trained, conditioned, slowly, repeatedly, through patterns you didn't even notice forming. Every scroll, every notification, every quick glance at something new, each one sends a signal. Move. Shift. Look elsewhere. Every instant hit of stimulation, every short burst of novelty, every easy reward without effort, trains your brain to expect the next thing. Faster, easier, more stimulating, more immediately satisfying. And over time, this becomes your baseline. Your mind adapts to speed, to constant change, to endless input. So when you remove that, when you sit in silence, when you try to focus on one thing, when there is no quick reward waiting, something feels wrong. Stillness becomes uncomfortable, not peaceful, but unsettling, not calm, but heavy. Silence starts to feel loud, empty, but somehow overwhelming. And focus begins to feel like effort, like something you have to push into place, like something unnatural. So your mind does what it has been trained to do. It escapes. It looks for something easier, something quicker, something more rewarding, a thought, a distraction, a memory, anything that pulls you away from the stillness. Not because your mind is weak, but because it has learned to run, and it has been rewarded for running, again and again and again. So expecting it to suddenly stay still, through force, through pressure, through willpower, won't work, because you're fighting conditioning with resistance. And resistance doesn't retrain the mind. It only creates more tension. This is where Zanshin changes everything. Because Zanshin doesn't force the mind to stay. It doesn't trap it. It doesn't punish it for drifting. It doesn't demand perfection. Instead, it retrains the instinct itself. Gently, quietly, consistently. Not by stopping the mind from leaving, but by changing what happens next. You notice when it drifts. Without judgment. Without frustration. Without labeling it as failure. And then, you return. Back to the moment. Back to the breath. Back to what is in front of you. Again, and again, and again. Each return, small, almost insignificant, but powerful. Because with every return, you weaken the habit of escape and strengthen the habit of presence. Until slowly, the mind stops running so far, stops leaving so often, stops searching for something else every second, and begins to realize there is nothing missing here, nothing lacking in this moment, nothing it needs to escape toward. And when that shift happens, focus no longer feels forced, stillness no longer feels uncomfortable, and presence becomes something your mind naturally returns to, even without effort. Chapter 4. The Practice of Returning. Zanshin is not about never losing focus. It was never meant to make you perfect, never meant to lock your mind into a state where it never drifts, never slips, never wanders. Because that version of focus doesn't exist. Not for you, not for anyone. The mind moves. It thinks. It imagines. It wanders without permission. So the goal was never to stop that completely. The real skill is something far more subtle. It's about how quickly you return. Because you will drift. Your attention will shift, quietly, without warning. A thought will appear and pull you away. A memory will surface and hold you for a moment. A random impulse will try to redirect your focus. And before you even realize it, you're gone. Not physically, but mentally, you've left the moment. That's inevitable. But here's where everything changes. Most people react the wrong way. They notice the drift and immediately judge it. Why can't I focus? What's wrong with me? I'm so distracted. And in that moment, they don't return. They create resistance. Frustration builds. Tension increases. And the mind drifts even further, pulled by emotion this time, not just thought. But Zanshin introduces a different response. A quieter one. Instead of judging it, you simply notice it. Calmly, clearly, without adding meaning to it. No labels. No criticism. No emotional reaction. Just awareness. My mind drifted. And that's it. No story attached. No identity formed around it. Then gently, you bring yourself back. Back to the breath. Back to the task. Back to the present moment. No force. No urgency. No pressure to get it right. Just return. Again. And again. And again. Each time your mind leaves. You notice. And you return. Quietly. Effortlessly. Almost like resetting, without tension. No frustration. Because frustration slows the return. No resistance. Because resistance keeps you stuck in the drift. Just return. Simple, consistent, unemotional. And over time, that repetition begins to change something deeper. Not your thoughts, but your relationship to them. You stop being pulled as far. You stop being lost as long. The gap between drifting and returning becomes smaller, faster, cleaner, almost automatic. Until one day, you realize something subtle but powerful. You're not fighting your mind anymore. You're guiding it. And that is what builds presence. Not intensity, not perfection, not forcing yourself into a state you can't sustain, but repetition, the quiet act of returning over and over, until staying becomes natural. Because presence is not something you achieve once. It's something you reinforce every time you come back. Chapter 5, Small Moments, Deep Control. You don't need extreme routines to practice Zanshin. You don't need to disappear into isolation. You don't need hours of silence or a perfectly controlled environment. You don't need to escape your life to train your mind. Because Zanshin was never meant to exist only in rare conditions. It was meant to exist everywhere. It begins in ordinary moments. Moments most people overlook. Moments that seem too small, too simple to matter. But those moments are where everything changes. When you walk, just walk. Feel each step. Notice the rhythm. Be aware of your movement without rushing ahead in your thoughts. Not walking while thinking about something else. Not walking while scrolling or planning or drifting. Just walking. Fully there. When you listen, just listen. Not waiting for your turn to speak. Not drifting into your own thoughts halfway through. Not hearing words while your mind is somewhere else. Be present with the sound, with the meaning, with the person in front of you. Because true listening requires presence. And presence requires that you stay. When you work, be fully inside the action, not partially engaged. Not switching between tasks every few minutes. Not letting your attention split into fragments. Just one task, one focus, one moment. No split attention. No background noise running in your mind, pulling you in different directions. No constant checking. No silent urge to escape the task. Just full engagement with what is in front of you. And at first, it will feel different, maybe even uncomfortable, because you're not used to staying. You're used to moving, to shifting, to dividing your attention across multiple things at once. But if you remain, if you continue to return and stay, even in these small moments, something begins to change. Slowly, almost invisibly, your awareness sharpens. You start to notice more. Details you once ignored become clear. Moments that once passed unnoticed begin to feel real. Your thoughts begin to slow down, not because you forced them to stop, but because you're no longer feeding them constant distraction. The mental noise fades. The urgency dissolves. The need to jump from one thing to another weakens. And in that space, clarity begins to emerge. You think more precisely. You act more intentionally. You feel more grounded in everything you do. Not because you became more intelligent overnight, but because you stopped leaving the moment. You stopped abandoning your attention every few seconds. And instead, you stayed. In simple actions. In small moments. In everyday life. And that's where real control is built. Not in extremes, but in consistency. Because when you can remain present in the smallest moments, you gain the ability to stay present in the ones that matter most. Chapter 6, The Identity Shift. This is where everything changes. Not on the surface, not in your routines, not in the way you try to force focus for a few minutes at a time, but deeper, at the level of identity. Because Zanshin is not something you do. It's not a technique you switch on, and then forget when the moment passes. It's not a temporary state you visit, and then lose when life gets noisy again. Zanshin is something you become, a way of operating, a way of being, a quiet standard you carry into every moment without needing to think about it. And this shift begins with how you see yourself. Because most people, without realizing it, build an identity around their distraction. They say things like, I can't focus. I'm easily distracted. My mind just doesn't stay still. And over time, those thoughts stop being observations and start becoming beliefs. Beliefs that shape behavior. Behavior that reinforces the belief. A loop. Subtle, but powerful. Because once you identify as someone who can't focus, every moment of distraction feels like proof. Every lapse confirms it. Every drift strengthens it. And without realizing it, you begin to live inside that identity. But Zanshin breaks that loop, not by forcing change, but by redefining who you are in the moment of awareness. You stop identifying as someone who fails to focus, and instead, you become someone who returns, someone who notices the instant their attention drifts, someone who doesn't react, doesn't judge, doesn't collapse into frustration, someone who simply comes back again and again and again. That becomes your standard, not perfection, not endless, flawless focus, but consistent return. And that identity changes everything, because identity shapes behavior. It determines how you respond in the exact moment where most people break. When distraction appears, you don't panic. When your mind drifts, you don't label it as failure. You recognize it, and you return, naturally, almost automatically. And behavior, repeated over time, shapes reality. Each return strengthens presence. Each moment of awareness reinforces control. Each instance of staying builds stability. Until gradually, something shifts. Presence stops feeling like effort. You're no longer trying to be focused. You simply are. The tension disappears. The internal struggle fades. And the mind that once felt scattered, inconsistent, unreliable, begins to change. It becomes sharper, quieter, more precise. Not because you forced it into submission, but because you changed the way you relate to it. You stopped fighting distraction and started mastering your return. And in that process, you didn't just improve your focus. You became someone who no longer leaves the moment without noticing. You were never stupid. Not in the way you were made to believe. Not in the moments where your thoughts didn't come together fast enough. Not in the times where clarity felt just out of reach. You were just absent, not completely gone, but not fully here either. A portion of your awareness drifting elsewhere, while your body remained in the moment, pulled away, quietly, repeatedly, by thoughts, distractions, and impulses that seemed small at first, but accumulated over time, until this pattern became familiar, until absence stopped feeling unusual, and started feeling like your default state. You began to operate like this without even noticing. A few seconds of focus, followed by a subtle drift. A return, followed by another departure. A cycle, one you didn't consciously choose, but one that became embedded through repetition. And because it repeated often enough, it began to define your experience. But now you see it, not as a flaw, not as a limitation, but as a pattern you can observe. And that awareness changes everything. Because the moment you see the pattern, you are no longer completely inside it. There is a space, even if it's small, between noticing and reacting. And in that space, you gain the ability to respond differently. You don't need to overhaul your entire mind overnight. You don't need to force instant transformation. You don't need to become perfect and focus from this moment forward. That's not how this works. Change, here, is subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. It happens in moments. Moments where you drift. And instead of continuing, you notice. Moments where awareness returns, even briefly, and you choose to come back. Not with pressure, not with frustration, but with quiet intention. Again and again and again. Each return is small. Each one seems insignificant on its own. But together, they begin to reshape your baseline. Absence is no longer automatic. Presence begins to increase. The gaps between awareness and distraction start to shorten. And over time, something shifts. Staying present no longer feels like a constant struggle. It becomes more natural, more stable, less dependent on effort, until eventually, you find yourself remaining in the moment longer, with less resistance and more clarity. Not because you forced yourself into a new identity overnight, but because you practiced returning consistently through each passing moment. And that steady repetition is what turns awareness into presence, and presence into something that feels effortless. If this shifted something in you, then don't just watch. Practice. Right now, bring your attention back. Feel where you are. Notice your breath. Become aware without forcing it. And if you're ready to rebuild your mind from the inside out, subscribe to the Cypher Phantom. Because discipline isn't about pushing harder. It's about becoming present enough to never drift away again.